This episode is brought to you by SureTest. Transform and revolutionize your health system's application testing process with SureTest managed test automation solution, SureManage. Eliminate 80% or more of your manual testing activities, reducing errors and reclaiming thousands of hours for your staff to focus on more rewarding, strategic projects.
Today on Newsday.
I think we need to meet the patient where they're at and leverage all different mediums of technology to help them stay healthier longer.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former CIO for a 16-hospital system and creator of This Week Health, where we are dedicated to transforming healthcare one connection at a time. Newsday discusses the breaking news in healthcare with industry experts. Now, let's jump right in.
Welcome to Newsday. I'm here today with Laura O'Toole, who is the CEO from SureTest. She's also a friend, a mentor, a This Week Health advisor. We love it when she joins the shows. She's got over 25 years of experience in healthcare IT and is instrumental in driving digital transformation and advancing automation strategies across our industry. So we're going to jump into 3 different articles, and we went thematically a bit about AI innovation, complexity of care, financial strains, technology adoption, workforce impact. What's fascinating, Laura, is thematically, these are happening across the industry. You could pull any article to cover these. And so when you think about some of the things we're talking about, just high level, when I say those things, transformation, complexity of care, adoption, workforce impact, what are you seeing out there?
I think it's still going to continue to come down to governance and application rationalization. I just think we keep coming back to that. And you talk about adoption in every single one of those articles, each a little bit different, right? You think about the article that was talking about using AI to really get intelligence about predictable medicine with the whole drug industry. At the end of the day, I think that governance and adoption, this is a big change agent for our industry from my perspective. And it's always going to be a challenge if those things are not in place first. And that's what worries me continually on this spectrum when we talk about AI, machine learning, getting people comfortable.
It is about the comfort level. And so one of the things that was interesting about this article about pharma firms buying into the promise of, they said AI shortcuts. And I feel like that diminished what really the intent of it is. And that's
Yeah.
the fact that the company that's doing this is Antiverse, that design precision antibody targets, moving drug development from trial and error to focused data-driven design. It takes 15 years to bring a drug to market, $1 to $2 billion.
Yes.
And this will significantly reduce that timeline or that time frame and using things already. You've got Google DeepMind, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and others that are investing. If it can significantly reduce the time to market and cost to bring drugs forward that can have an impact on healthcare, is that a space where if your organization is lagging or nervous about bringing these types of technologies forward, here's where it truly can help across the continuum.
Yeah. I think the whole drug industry, though, that's going to be a big leap for a lot of clinicians. And if you think about the 15 years to get a drug from inception to trial, all the QA rounds of testing that need to go through that phase, if I'm a clinician, I'm going to want more proof in the pudding. And we see even in our business, having clinicians really be willing to embrace automation. Can you really do it as well as I can do it? Even though we're emulating exactly your workflow, can you do that? So I think it's going to be really important when we're talking about something that can advance medicine so significantly that clinicians are in early and often, and that you're finding a group of physicians, clinicians within that hospital that can be an advocate for this. And so they've got to be together out of the gate. I just think bringing it in and that communication and the whole change management aspect of this is going to be critically important in order for it to be successful.
To your point, if you are using governance as an example to follow the evolution of where this is headed, then you're understanding how integration of AI in drug discovery can be faster, more efficient treatment, cost savings, improved outcomes. It can give you a competitive edge, except being really aware of the fact that any kind of regulatory and ethical considerations in drug discovery need to also be front of mind in the conversation. Data privacy, the transparency of your algorithms.
Right.
And the thing I think about all the time is our risk and over reliance on AI for predictions or other components of patient care.
Yeah, and no doubt, especially for the large academics, research hospitals, this can be a huge competitive advantage. Even now, if you look at what's happening with a lot of things that even Epic is doing, where you can now see somebody else within an ecosystem that has similar symptoms to be able to collaborate more effectively on research or drug indicators that can make a real difference for a patient that's sitting in front of you in a doctor's office. If you think about that competitive edge that the health systems, the academics, the whole research arm of these large academics, if they embrace this, I think the first or second that really do this, it's going to be a huge competitive advantage.
And here's what else I love about it. If you are able to take all of that data and then also see where there are other like patients, so you can help to remove some of the bias of a geographically centric area.
Exactly.
Then you apply the DNA or genomic testing to rapid drug development. That is such a revolutionary component right there. Like that entire equation to me says, maybe not in my specific lifetime, but imagine what it means for diseases or chronic conditions today that you're the wrong patient at the wrong time in terms
Exactly.
of the advancement of the type of care or treatment plans that are available.
And if you think about some of the chronic illnesses or even certain cancers that affect socioeconomic groups, to be able to think about rural communities and make a real difference in healthcare for people that don't have the kind of access for whatever reason that maybe you and I have, either because we're in healthcare, we know a lot of people, we live in a major city, we're aligned with a major research academical medical center. I think the opportunity to really make a difference for all patients is significant.
And yet the next thing we found was an article about how hospitals can make patients safer. It's specifically drilling into covering a documentary called The Pitch, which is
Yep.
Patient Safety's Next Generation. I believe it's on Netflix.
Mhm.
And the conversation about the importance of collaboration between clinicians and technology developers to improve patient safety and quality of care, except that sometimes the slow adoption or too many point solutions
Mhm.
end up creating almost an effective clogging of the system. How do you differentiate where you do lean into, say, a spotlight on maternal health, or in this article, creating a command center that was inspired by NASA, some of the VR technologies being used to reduce sedation needs and surgery? As we think about making patients safer in hospitals, but it does require this appropriate aggregation of solutioning. How do you get past the too many things at once, too many pilots, too many perspectives in order to focus on the right one?
I think you're going to start to see a lot of these health systems that have major venture groups that are aligned with them really pick and choose what they want to bring into a health system. And it's going to be about, again, focus, governance, application rationalization. I think when we start to look at too many things at once, it just causes a significant barrier to adoption. There's so much noise, there's not enough focus. And that's why I think the whole landscape of what we're doing with AI and machine learning needs to be done in an incremental, very methodical, very engaged way with clinicians that can be a voice out to the population so that there's just more adoption. In that article, he still went on to say that adoption continued to be a problem, even though we identified that this would really work. I think it's like anything. It's just about connectedness, relationships, communication early and often, and getting people aligned from the very beginning.
I think about too, what you talked about in terms of a barrier for innovation is clinicians may not have time to
Yeah.
innovate full time. Entrepreneurs have a hard time getting buy-in from hospitals to adopt the technology. If there is that secret sauce for suggesting a need for greater hospital support for new technologies, how important is it from your perspective that a clinician comes out of medical school and practices for a period of time before becoming almost an entrepreneur or the innovator of some of the technologies that can address maybe the reason that they didn't go into full-time care for a
Mhm.
longer period of time in their profession, or what their peers are telling them is they're just going to get burnt out from having so many things pulling at their time and their capabilities. What is the right mixture of that?
From my perspective, I don't think that there's anything that can replace a physician or any clinician's ability to interact with a patient, be hands-on a patient, listen to a patient, diagnose a patient, treat a patient. I think that's critically important. Now, depending on how much time they did doing it in their residency versus their research versus all of a sudden becoming an innovator and this great entrepreneur, I don't know what the right balance or mix is, but the human component of this, and if you think about caring for a patient, that, from my perspective, cannot get lost in all this, or we're just not going to get the ultimate value out of it. And I think that you're starting to see a lot of triangulation around venture capital groups that are owned by health systems, these innovators and entrepreneurs, and the third kind of leg of the stool in terms of clinician involvement. Even many of the CEOs that are bringing this innovation forward are clinicians, but I think making sure that as a part of that team that's going to go deploy this and try to make something specific work in a hospital, you have to have champions, clinical champions from the hospital that can basically end up being the advocate and the cheerleader to get their colleagues to want to buy in. This is basic change management from my perspective, and just making sure you have the right people at the start to take that through the trajectory. I just think it will make a difference with adoption.
And having a physician with the influence to be able to say, I'm a surgeon, I want to use VR to reduce
Right.
sedation needs during surgeries for things that make sense, for things like orthopedic surgery or burn treatment and wound care, for infusion for someone who is going through cancer, even childbirth and labor. And if you have a maternal health ward and you need to have a point solution, in this article's case, helping to identify high-risk pregnancies earlier, and then you also have VR as a part of that component for the childbirthing process. If maternal health is a superpower for your healthcare organization, if you have physicians that are leaning into technology with it, you're solving multiple problems at once, even if you do have a couple of different ways of going about doing it.
Yeah, and if you think about virtual reality like that, you meditate, right? Think about where you can take your own mind to try to really augment this with just your spiritual well-being and using this technology to help you work through pain or work through whatever it might be. That was very cool to me to read.
It is very cool, especially since the third article we pulled is the rising complexity of hospitalized patient challenges in healthcare systems. And it's very specifically talking about today patients are generally older, they take more medications, they have multiple active medical problems, which has doubled the complexity compared to 15 years ago. Chronic diseases are more prevalent than ever. And even though we have all these advancements in healthcare to enable people to live longer with complex conditions, you also want to live a longer, healthier, happier, independent life because you're healthier. And so, if these complexities are creating strains on healthcare staff, how do some of these technologies and capabilities create a space where, wow, the patient can be at home, they can be healthier with fewer medications? Like our answer of prescribing something for multiple chronic conditions, getting in front of the chronic condition with some
Mhm.
of these therapeutics is a pretty groundbreaking space, because think about how many people are going to be aging into that generation or into that area in the next 20 years. If we get in front of that now with some of the things we've already been talking about, it definitely changes the dynamic.
Yeah, and if you think about the DRG landscape and you think about that population of people, it's going to continue to have a huge financial impact on our health systems. And there's no question. I think I just went through this with my dad. He recently passed away, and a couple of things were just very clear to me as we went through this process. One, the need to have an advocate is so critically important. And I worry about our elder population that don't have that, or those that live in more rural areas that don't have that. But if you think about the command centers and some of the capabilities with cameras and just feeding information, last year, I remember I did a post about Cleveland Clinic had a hospital at home, and literally it was a command center. And it was the best experience that my dad had. It allowed him to be at home with his dog. He was happy. There were a couple little tweaks and things that were happening, but generally speaking, he was an acute inpatient at home being monitored by a command center with people coming in, including even diagnostic clinicians coming in, ultrasound, x-ray, all the lab folks were coming in to see him at the bedside. So when you think about this older population and the amount of chronic disease and illness, There has to be a way to use this technology to be able to mitigate some of that chronic continual disease that we're seeing in our elderly population. And even my dad, who was completely technologically incapable, he couldn't even send a text. They figured out a way to have a device that could talk to him and remind him to do things in his home. I think we need to meet the patient where they're at and leverage all different mediums of technology to help them stay healthier longer.
As the CIO leaning beyond the technology, which so many CIOs do today, you have to have the operational and financial acumen. Because if you're thinking about solving problems from the perspective of, hey, I need
Yeah.
to address the compression of financial margins due to what you shared about fixed DRG payments, you realize that, hey, I can take my data analytics programs, coordination tools, EHR capabilities, and really manage a multifaceted treatment plan effectively. That starts to think about how the clinical staff can be most supported. And if it's AI for decision support and workflow optimization to
Mhm.
alleviate strain without technology as a standalone, it's an integrated
Right.
solution to the
Exactly.
organization. People are all coming together to plan for what's coming and not what's just happening in the moment.
Exactly right. And I will tell you, just going through that experience from a technical perspective, it was a team of people that this all was coming from the CIO, from the technology group, swarming in on my dad's house and setting all this up. And there were so many different mediums to be able to deal with somebody who wasn't good at using their smartphone versus somebody that would be. And if you think about this and the capability to take care of the elderly in our rural communities as well, it's just astounding to me. And I will tell you, and I've said this repeatedly over the last year, in the 30 years that I've been in this business, I have never seen a CIO's job so hard as it is today and what is expected of them. The CIO of 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, the capability and the skill, and as you said, the business acumen, the out of the box thinking, the leadership capability, the ability to influence key decision makers, the ability to engage with venture groups and entrepreneurs to be able to bring top box technology to make a difference for their organization. They are at the top table from my perspective, the ones that are doing their job really well. And that is no easy feat.
It's not. You start thinking about who's surrounding you. If you're the CIO, you may or may not have digital in there as well, but it's all digital. You may or may
Right,
not
right,
have the innovation or the experience or the other pieces that are now multiple roles in the organization, or even see the chief AI officer. Where are those people reporting? How are they coming together? I'm not as bent on reporting structures as
yeah.
I am with collaboration models. So we ask our care teams to create clinical models and clinical pathways, and
Mhm.
then the technology facilitates these transitions, both from a patient care perspective for adapting to
Mhm.
demands as much as adoption of the technology internally and externally. If you can bring those people together effectively, then that is where you start to see that organizational change management take root and actually work. It too can be as formulaic as governance, as long as
Right.
all those people agree that they are there for the same reasons. They will tell you fundamentally that they are, and yet sometimes those structures make it really messy, especially in bigger hospital systems. And I've been in a two
Yeah.
hospital system, and I've been in a 200 hospital
Right.
system. It goes back to the roles and responsibilities and relationships that allow you to advance the care. Yet there always has to be a champion. And often it's
Right.
the CEO that is reminding people of that mission and how we can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I think is really important for CIOs with what's expected of them now, you can't be, from my perspective, a strategic thinker, someone that's a constant out of the box thinker that's bringing in all these different areas in order to solve a problem from a technical perspective, or whether it's digital, whether it's using new tools and technologies, and also be the operator. I'm starting to see, I don't know if you're seeing this, our more strategic CIOs, I think, recognize they absolutely have to have an operational CIO underneath them, or sometimes more than one, because there's no possible way that you can do it all. And the requirements now, I think, are so fundamentally different for that top box in terms of the technology landscape for our health systems.
And we keep seeing the transition of leadership. And so part of being successful in any role is what I always used to say, like managing up, training your boss.
Yeah,
When you have constant turnover, that 3+ year sort
yeah,
of cycle of different executives coming in and out of hospitals, having to re-explain the story over and over again. You are hopeful for the continuity of why we're doing certain things versus having to re-justify it every time. Too many CIOs today share with me that they lose traction every time a peer swaps out and they're
Yep.
having to reestablish the importance or purpose behind what they are doing. The most impactful are changes in the CFO and changes in the CEO. And
Yes.
that's where I say make sure that the board understands your strategy and perspective, and that that is just part of what's happening in the organization, not having to go and refight for those perspectives. Although it is a constant scenario that our CIOs face today, which only adds to the complexity of what you shared about how hard the job has become.
Which I think is why it's so important that anything that we can do, folks that partner with health systems to continually evolve solutions that we're willing to do as a full solution, as a managed service, do it fixed fee so they know what they're going to get, and bring solutions to the market that are really going to alleviate time and help their IT leaders, their clinicians actually work at the top of their license. So we've got to continually come up with solutions that can help them manage this body of work.
What's something you do better than anybody in your domain? When you think about you reduce manual workload, you accelerate system implementations, you have seamless high quality performance. It's part of that digital fabric.
Yep.
And what I love that SureTest does, and this is me plugging for you, is hey, you've got a reliable platform. It's compliant, it optimizes systems, and you're enhancing patient care and operational outcomes. That's a story I'm bringing to my board about the partnerships and the strength of what it allows us to do throughout the rest of our organization. So thank you for a product you bring that we all want to use as CIOs, and for your leadership and advisory perspective on how we keep making this industry better. I love conversations with you.
I love talking to you too, and love talking to another woman leader. You know how I feel about that. I think I said I had a great week at Chime last week, and I was in the CEO forum, and 5 of the 200 people that were probably in that room were women. And you know how I feel about that. It's not enough. I'm not saying anything's better or worse, just different perspectives. I think different perspectives across the board will just continue to make us be more diverse, more resourceful, more collaborative. And I think in order to get all these things that we talked about today really moving, it's got to be about relationships. It's got to be about connectedness, and it's got to be about trust. And to have the ability to be even a small part of that is what jazzes me every day in our space.
Yep, we keep amplifying voices around us with our male allies, and anything is absolutely possible.
I agree, my friend.
Laura, always appreciate you. That's Newsday. Thank you for listening. And that's all for now.
Thanks for listening to Newsday. There's a lot happening in our industry, and while Newsday covers interesting stuff, another way to stay informed is by subscribing to our daily insights email, which delivers expertly curated health IT news straight to your inbox. Sign up at thisweekhealth.com/news. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.